It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are, of course, listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. A couple of quick things before we get into the meat and potatoes, but we do have a deconversion story today a little later on for our interview. You're going to love it. And, of course, she has a book available about it. I finished 75% of it. I ran out of time, but hey, you know what? It's pretty good. So go check it out. It's called Black Sheep, and we're going to talk about her story and her book a little later in the show. A couple of random things, or maybe not random things, but things that have come up, people have asked me about on emails, and I might know some things about these, but I might not know everything. Well, actually, I know I will not know everything, and the first one in particular was the topic of price gouging, and what is it, and how does it work, and it's one of those things that's kind of like pornography. You know it when you see it. But price gouging is not adjusting your prices to offset the increased cost of your goods, or pay raises that you give your employees, or something, you know, where you just think that the market might pay a little bit more. So, but it's the extreme cases where when a hurricane is coming towards the Gulf Coast and gas stations suddenly go from $3 a gallon to $15 a gallon because, you know, they didn't pay fucking $15 a gallon to get the gas, and they might have a limited supply, and you could argue supply and demand affects it. And if you don't want to pay $15 for the gasoline, ain't nobody making you unless you need it to fill your car to leave a dangerous situation. So generally in the United States, it's related to a natural disaster or some event that changes things, that makes things suddenly more urgent, where you spontaneously start charging higher prices. And we've seen some of this with the comical but yet necessary, I guess, in today's modern society, toilet paper, or people going around and buying up truckloads of hand sanitizer, going to every gas station they can find around, 100 miles from them, and buying thousands and thousands and thousands of little hand sanitizers for $1 or $2 or $3 a piece, and then selling them on Amazon for $15. That's price gouging. You didn't have to do that. I mean, and it's one of those things that if you had bought it for $2 and you'd sold it for $4 as a convenience, there might be merit that there's something valuable in your time and you collecting it so people can buy it on Amazon because the regular sellers are out. But when you go to 5 or 10 times the price, and of course on top of that there's an additional delivery charge, you're taking advantage of people. You're not just providing a service. And that's kind of the difference between price gouging and a price increase. It's usually a local law, state or city level, so you'd have to check your local rules on what is price gouging. And it's one of those things that you can raise your prices and charge more and get away with it, make more profit if it sells. But if people get the kind of that nasty feeling that you're being a dick, then they might look into filing a complaint and pursuing charges against you for price gouging. So I guess that's kind of how that works. Another funny thing is taxes. Because of the recent market drops, and it looks like today is the end of business on the March 19th, almost the end of business when I'm recording this little segment. The U.S. stock market, as measured by the S&P 500, year to date is down about 24%. And from, I guess a month ago it was up 4%. So it's down 28% from the peak. If you have some old stocks that you've been meaning to get rid of, but you didn't want to have a great big tax bill, hey, this might be your chance to sell something that you don't really want to have, but you didn't want to have a big tax bill because its price probably went down a whole bunch. So you could dramatically reduce the amount of capital gains that you have on something that you've kind of been wanting to get rid of anyway. So think about that. I mean, if you had something that was worth $10,000 and now it was worth $50,000, it's lost a bunch of its price. Let's say it's lost 25% of its value, or about $12,500. Now when you sell it, the gain is not $40,000, but maybe $27,000. So it can make a big difference. It's one of those times where maybe now is a good time to sell that. It's a good time to rebalance, a good time to look at your bond funds. It's something that we've talked about. I did mention it last show. I don't actually remember how much detail I went into, but look at the bonds that you have and pull them up on Morningstar.com and look over the last 30 days. Did the bonds do what you wanted them to do? I mean, if you're in bonds to make 6 or 7 or 8%, that happens in good times, but in bad times, they can go down a whole lot. But if you bought really conservative bonds, you might have made a little bit, or maybe close to zero, or maybe minus 1%. And maybe making minus 1% is not good, but when you compare it to losing 28 or 30%, it looks pretty good. So make sure your bonds did what you thought they were going to do. And if you're in retirement, hopefully they did. If you're close to retirement, maybe it's an opportunity for you to fix that before it becomes more necessary for the bonds to actually do what you were hoping they would do. At the end of the show, I think I'm going to do a special little closing segment on maybe what you should do now. And a couple of thoughts that I'll kind of wet your whistle. One, if you were expecting me to make some trades or to pull you out of the stock market before the shoe dropped, and I've covered this over the years, and my position is still the same. If you ask, what am I going to do to protect you? I'm not going to do a fucking thing. That's just not how this works. That's not how Phil's plan works. It's not how the system works. And it's really fucking hard to know when to get out and when to get back in. Covered that last show. So, no, I'm not going to do anything particular to protect you before the market goes down. If you were 100% in the S&P 500, you've lost 28%. That's just how it works. That's why the stock market is something you do. It's not something you try. It's a lifelong thing, and it will come back. At least that's my expectation. Every single time in the past when the stock market has dropped. I mean, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, George Bush, now Trump. All these times the market goes down. Every time in the past it has gone back up and then made money. You just need to have patience, and that's hard to do. So we're going to take a little bit of break. We're going to talk about a special income fund and find out more about that. And we'll also learn about what it's like to be born, grow up as a Pentecostal evangelical Christian and become a minister and then leave. We'll find out about that, and then we'll close up maybe with that special statement on what maybe you could do given today's market changes. We'll talk, and hopefully you enjoy the entire show.
But I don't think you have to be a religious person to have good values. So the way I see this is I'm going to start where you started, and that is I believe everyone should be treated with respect. As I said, for me it is a basic value. Every human being has value, and that means every human being should be treated with respect. And that's true whether we're talking about black or white, straight or gay or trans, whether we're talking about old or young. I think this is really an important part of who we are. And if I can, let me just pick up one. Although you mentioned several, but I think maybe it may be the one, since you mentioned it first, is the question about abortion. I understand that you and I may have differences. There may be a lot of different views in this room. But here's what I'm certain about, and that is a woman who's in the position of trying to decide what she's going to do about a pregnancy that she may not have planned for, may not have hoped for, may have been forced upon her, is a woman who should be able to call on anyone for help. She should be able to call on her partner. She should be able to call on her mom. She should be able to call on her priest or her rabbi or her pastor. But the one entity that should not be in the center of that very hard decision is the federal government. That's how I see it.
Mailbag. I've got some mail that came today, and I'm going to have a little fun with it. It's ironic, or I guess strategic, planned, that this salesperson called me just today, almost at the exact same time my mail came, and thankfully I let it roll to voicemail, because I do get a lot of calls. So if I don't answer your phone call when you call me, my apologies. Leave me a voicemail or email me, and I'll get back to you. But I get so many spam phone calls now, it's ridiculous. But I got a phone call and mail from Rational Funds. And with a name like that, it's got to be good, right? I mean, it's rational. Let's see, it's the Rational Special Situations Income Fund. And you're going to love this. It has a maximum 4.75% load. So 4.75% of your money, poof, gone in as soon as you invest. And then the expense ratio on the C-class shares is as high as 3.16%. That's right, over 3%. And this is in a time period where I get bothered by mutual funds that have 1.5% expense ratio, because you can get index funds and pay me for less than the average fund. But this is 3.16%. 2.41, I'll have to give them credit, is lower in the A share class, which has the almost 5% front end load. So in the first year, you're going to be out about 7-8%. And it has this nice graph here going back all the way to 2009. And I never trust the documents that these people send me. So I pulled it up on Morningstar and I'm like, what the what? This fund hasn't even been open for a year. And you'll never believe it, but in the past year, it's underperformed its benchmark. Wah, wah. But they're talking about how great they are for the last 10 plus years. So how does that compute? So I had to read through all the bazillion documents, and I found this fun passage for you. I think you'll like it. It's a little wordy, so forgive me here. I'm going to give it a try. The fund commenced operations by acquiring all of the assets and liabilities of ESM Fund I, L.P., the predecessor fund, in a tax-free reorganization on July 17, 2019. In connection with the reorganization, investors of the predecessor fund received institutional shares of the fund. The fund's investment objectives, policies, guidelines, and restrictions in all material respects equivalent to those of the predecessor fund. And forgive me here, this is very small print. However, the predecessor fund was not registered under the 1940 Act and therefore not subject to certain investment restrictions, limitations, and diversification requirements that are imposed by the 1940 Act or Subchapter M of the Internal Revenue Code, which, if they had been applicable, might have adversely affected the predecessor fund's performance. The fund's sub-advisor was the investment advisor of the predecessor fund. The fund's fees and expenses are expected to be higher than those of the predecessor fund. So if the fund's expenses were applied to the predecessor fund's performance, the fund performance would have been lower. So even if they could do what they used to do, which they can't because that was not a registered fund, which I would never own, by the way, for various different reasons, which I won't get into. So that data is maybe true, but who gives a shit? Because they can't do what the previous fund did exactly, because they have to qualify with all kinds of new regulations and requirements and investing things, rules, laws. And the fund expense ratio is much higher. So when they're bragging about making, let's see here, the last 10 years, 13% per year, you're going to lose almost 3% of that from the expense ratio, not counting the front end load. Not sure what the risk is on this. And a lot of the data in Morningstar is not fully populated because this fund is too new as far as Morningstar is concerned, because they only cover registered funds, not just things that exist out there that aren't registered, I guess. I don't know what to call it. So it's curious, they start with this big chart, makes it look like they've been around forever. And in the stories, they talk about how this fund started in 2009 with a teeny little asterisk. And then I finally found a teeny little asterisk and found out they bought out some other fund. I don't know how that happened or why that happened. They didn't give me those details. So it's kind of a comical thing. If you want a high load, incredibly high expense ratio fund. Oh, I did have this one other thing. Where was that? There's so many pages. The symbol for this is RFXIX. Nice symbol, right? And it said, how did RFXIX achieve its strong performance? Oh, good. I get some information here. And I quote, the legacy non-agency RMBS asset class has performed incredibly well due to the factors described previously, and we believe this will continue for many years to come. Oh, I thought you were going to tell me why it did well. You just said that it did well, and the reason was because you described it previously. Well, that wasn't clear to me. Furthermore, because many of the securities were originated prior to 2008, there are a number of, there's a word missing here. There are a number of opportunities that exist for excess returns. That's not why you did well. That's why you think you might do well in the future. Anyway, not something I'm buying, but it's just kind of fun what people cobble together. They find something that they can kind of sort of tell a nice story for it, and then they have someone send me a letter. And it's interesting, the letter, I'm baffled by this letter. It looks like a normal letter with handwritten to and from address on it. And I'm trying to figure out if it's really handwritten or if it's like one of those print things where it looks handwritten. And then inside, from the same person, is a handwritten note on a little postie, a little sticky thing. And it's in cursive. Who writes in cursive? Does that still exist? I thought we banned that back after the bicentennial. But yeah, it's in cursive, and it looks like a different handwriting. It is obviously different handwriting than the letter, because the cursive thing looks pretty sexy, and the handwriting looks like something I would have written. Where I can barely scratch out my name because everything I do is typed now. So not that it was ever good, but it's just curious that I'm almost tempted. I'm not going to do it because I got shit to do. I'm almost tempted to call this guy and go, can you explain the different handwriting that has your name on the outside and the inside of the letter? But I'm not ever going to recommend anyone buy this, but I just thought you guys might enjoy mailbag. So there's one for you from Rational Special Situations Income Fund. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. I know you're totally excited. We have Cassie Fox coming up here in a few seconds. A great interview with her about her amazing book that I just finished, only 75% of it, but I got really close because we set this up kind of last minute. And the book is Black Sheep, and it's all about her path from growing up a very devout evangelical Christian to becoming a minister to then becoming an atheist, and what that means in her life. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be on the show.
Well, you're very kind to join us. Kind to join us. That sounds right. It sounded like weird because I was thinking of like lumber joining or something in my head. So yes, I have issues. Read the book, or at least 75% of it, and enjoyed it very much. You actually are a writer. It flowed very nicely.
Oh, thanks. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
I've heard from a lot of readers that emailed me that, have religious backgrounds they've left, and it's really been an encouragement and help to them just to hear a story that they can relate to, or even just people that, they didn't have a religious background, but I think it helps people understand, like, why it's so hard to leave these religions, like what it's like to grow up in a home like that, and what a person is facing to climb out of that, which is many large obstacles. So it's been great hearing from readers and just knowing it's been so well received and helped a lot of people.
That's fantastic. I'm delighted. And it's one of those things that you may not be aware, but my regular listeners know that from time to time I have people on with their deconversion stories, loss of faith stories, that, whatever name we assign to it, where they used to be religious and they're not now. And there are the occasional person, and I'm going to include myself in that category, where I just kind of stopped and it was all cool. I mean, I was 13. It was, I guess, junior high, maybe 8th grade, maybe 9th grade. I'm not sure. And we didn't talk about it. My friends, I wasn't really in deep. They weren't really in deep. And never really became a problem. So there are people that had more trying times, I'll say, and that was
yeah. So that definitely wasn't my story.
Yeah, that clearly wasn't you. And I really like us. Some stories are good when they go out of sequence and jump around to keep it light and refreshing, or something, or confusing sometimes. Your book flowed quite chronologically, and I enjoyed that very much. And so, you talked about you were in a private school when you were elementary, I guess. What were those schools like?
So it was really small. The school basically had one hallway, and I think the most significant thing is, though, it was just a way of keeping us from knowing about alternative views. That's why people send their children to schools like that. So, anything scientific that would not be supported by the Bible, which is most of science, it's just never presented. And, all the children that you're with, your fellow students, they're all also evangelical Christians. And even beyond that, and I share this in the book, like, every subject matter is a means through which teaching about God is done. So when I'm learning, sentence structure in my grammar classes, all those sentences are like supposed truths about God. Like they weave God into everything. And so that becomes like the focus. You're learning math, and they're finding ways of making, when you do like problem solving and things like that, it's something about, a Bible story or about God. And so you're just hearing about it all the time. You're never really hearing about anything else. You don't have fellow students, friends, anyone that is living any differently or doing anything different. So, when you're 7 and 8 years old, you just kind of assume that's how the world is. And you hear about, there's this world out there that is not like this, but you don't really get to interact with it. And so anything they tell you about that world, that it's dark and it's evil and people are so uncaring, and it actually was kind of scary to think about being around non-Christians, because I'd never really been around them. And so all I heard about them were these terrible, terrible things. That's pretty much how I went to school till 3rd grade. And then my my family had some financial changes, and so we could not go there anymore. We couldn't afford the private education. And so then I was just suddenly thrust into public school with no ability to really know how to socially interact with other children. I mean, it's kind of, I think you being in a Methodist background would be different, but in like really hardcore evangelical Christianity, people even like behave with like certain mannerisms. They have like a different sense of humor. It's kind of like a culture in and of itself. And so it's not just about what you believe about God or the world or whatever. It's really just the way you talk to people. It's very different. And so it was really traumatizing to just suddenly be in public school like that. I was just very unprepared for that. And my peers picked up on it very quickly, so I really was not accepted there.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were the kindest about it, right? That they would never be assholes in elementary or junior high.
Yeah, imagine that kids being assholes. But yeah, I was actually really terribly bullied, and none of them really knew. I was really embarrassed about I didn't tell kids where I'd gone to school because I knew that they would make fun of me. So it wasn't even about like a religious thing. They just could tell I was very socially awkward, and it was really hard. It was very difficult.
That's a lot of change to go through. And early in the book, you talked about starting to learn a little bit about American history from a more, I guess, secular, normal worldview, right. and not everything about a small band of hardcore Christians that came to the United States and the founding fathers were all Christians and made a Christian nation. You started to learn that America had flaws, and it wasn't simple and clean and easy, and sometimes people did very dark things. And you brought up slavery. Walk us through that moment and that experience and how it affected you.
Yeah, that was actually, it was really my first time that I'd ever doubted anything that I had been taught. So it was in fifth grade. So I'd been in public school for over a year. And up until that point, everything about American history was about these, heroes that came over here and to set up a society where everyone was free to worship God, of course, just the Christian God. And they were just these holy men that were, really, I just like superheroes is kind of how they were put out in our minds, that they never did anything wrong. They always served Jesus and, all that. And so then I'm sitting in my fifth grade history class, and this was so profound to me. I even remember like what my history textbook looked like back then in fifth grade.
Yeah.
So this was a huge moment for me. We started to learn about slavery, which I did not know happened, and it was, for a fifth grade book, fairly graphic for the time. This was the 80s, where they didn't talk about stuff, as deeply as they do now, but just talking about like taking people from Africa against their will on these ships. And then I remember seeing like maybe it was just drawings, I guess, of people being put on the platforms, and they had tar put on their back, or they'd been whipped, and they're just being auctioned off like they were cattle or things like that. And it was hard for me to even understand, like, how could this have been happening in this country where there were all these holy people that were all serving God? Because my understanding of America was everyone was Christian at first, and then, a portion of the country had fallen away since then. And so I just decided, well, these people must not have been Christians then, because Christians wouldn't do this to somebody. And so I went home and shared that with my dad, and thinking that we would have this conversation about it. Maybe I'd get my questions answered. And my dad just really became irate, like, how dare I question whether George Washington and all those guys were Christians or holy or righteous or whatever. And that they just wouldn't really talk about it. Then later that night at dinner, we talked about it some more. And it was basically just thrown in my face, like, how dare you, question these things? I thought that's just how it was back then. And, I don't know why being raised to think that way, why that didn't sit right with me, because I know so many other people that asked those same questions and it did sit right with them. Like, oh, that's just kind of how it was back then. So I don't know what it is about my personality or nature that kind of made me hang on to that, but or maybe I had just kind of internalized it at that point, like imagining what it would have been like to be on that platform and treated in that way. That didn't answer it for me. Like, who cares if that's how it was back then? That was still really fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if you went to those people and said, hey, how do you feel about this? This is just kind of how it is here. I don't think they would have been like, yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's just how it is.
Yeah.
And so I kind of kept thinking about that, but I also felt like trapped in this corner where I really had nobody to ask those questions further, and I'd really been shamed and even mocked and, treated like these were terrible, terrible questions. I felt really guilty for wondering about them, and so I really didn't know how else to handle that besides just kind of forgetting about it and not thinking about it, because, at that age, being in fifth grade, that the best thing would have been to have a real conversation to help me process that, and that became not possible to do.
Yeah,
so,
it's not just a religion. I mean, it's an entire thought system. It controls what you think, what you're allowed to think about, what you're allowed to ask about, and there's mechanisms built in and designed, some accidentally, some intentionally, to shut it down. That clearly this was a point where you had what seems like probably to almost every listener of my show hey, that's a pretty good question, kid.
Right.
But that was clearly not the response you got. Your response was such that, okay, I know not to do that again.
Right.
That I'll just do something else. Don't ask that. I've made the example sometimes. When kids get to the point where they start to doubt Santa, if everyone around them belittled them and harassed them and made them feel like pieces of shit for questioning Santa, maybe that would stick around a little bit longer. So it's not just the knowledge and it's the information, it's the whole system. You also talked about starting to learn about science a little bit in high school, but that also had problems.
Right. So I actually really love science. It's my favorite. I love learning about the world. I particularly love about learning about animals and just different species and how they've, the adaptations they have. I don't know why. My son actually has the same curiosities. He just loves learning about different animals and, how the environment they live in. And, at the time I didn't understand, but my interest really is in evolutionary theory and just how we came to be, how animals came to be, how just amazing it is that life persists. And, a lot of life hasn't persisted here, but overall a lot of species have, and just to kind of see their little niches that they've managed to wedge into. But, science was a big problem. My maternal grandfather actually was really he wasn't a scientist or anything, but it was just something he really enjoyed. I didn't even actually know this till probably in the last several years is how little this was talked about. But I learned from my mom's sister that actually my grandfather used to send them out when they were kids to get some pond water, and they would make microscope slides out of it. And he's always doing little science experiments with them and things like that. It's just something he liked to do. And I guess I inherited those traits. So I was the same way. I just kind of like to know how things work and how things came to be. And so I really enjoyed my science classes. I remember in middle school, I took a microscope class for an elective. And I just loved it. I loved being able to go to the lab every day after lunch and do a class like that. But then when I got into high school, when I got a little bit more in depth, I really just started to feel a lot of pressure. I would say less so from my parents at that point, although I think if they had known the specific things that were being taught in the classes about natural selection and things like that, they would have had more of a problem. By then, I was really involved in youth group and church, and there's a lot of pressure to just not learn those things. We were taught that scientists were all atheists who hated God, which is kind of like looking back on it now, I'm not sure why I didn't see, like, how could you hate God if you don't even believe in him? But, that these people are like, they're willfully like falsifying data, that scientists' big aim is to, lead the world to atheism and to turn everyone away from God. And I remember my dad saying something about a television evangelist said that the reason scientists teach what they do is because they're in sin and they want to continue in that sin, so they just try to lead others into the sin as well. So, when your number one focus is supposed to be on serving God, it's like your most important thing, and there was definitely a lot of shame around, like, well, why would you be learning from these people that are doing these terrible things? None of this stuff is even true anyway. And so, pretty quickly it was, when all your friends, when your youth leaders and, all the people in your life really that matter to you are making you kind of like you said, just feel like shit for liking this stuff. So I stopped taking science electives at school, and that my education really suffered after that. I didn't really realize at the time what was going on. I just lost interest in school. But looking back at it, I really think, like, when the one subject that I really was passionate about, that really excited me, was gone, then school in general was just not exciting to me. I started making terrible grades in school. I wasn't really doing homework or studying or anything because I just hated being there. And so, it's something, if I sit and think too much about it, I can probably start to become kind of bitter about it, because I do feel like I was robbed of many things. I kind of wonder where, if my parents had never converted to this religion. My parents were not raised in this religion. They converted to it when I was very young. Like, if that had never happened, and I had been able to just study the science and be encouraged and, to feel good about myself for liking those things, where things could have gone. But it's over. I feel very lucky I got out of it at all. But, so for years, I just kind of ignored science, other than, every once in a while I'd pick up a magazine article or magazine that I would see like an article and that was kind of interesting, or just little things like that. But I will say from that point moving forward, I just had this lingering unhappiness. And I don't mean like I was just entirely, it's kind of hard to explain to people. In many ways, I was very happy. But it was kind of like under all that, which is this lingering feeling of like something was just off and not quite where it was supposed to be.
Well, at some point,
until many years later that I was able to re-enter doing science, that finally got better because I was doing what I love to do. I was able to like be myself, and I think that's the biggest thing that this religious upbringing took from me, was the ability to just be myself. Everything that kind of made me, the things that I like, that I'm really passionate about, were completely against my religion. So I was never really allowed to pursue those things.
You had mentioned at some point that your religious upbringing, or at least particularly camp, was a lot like the movie Jesus Camp. You stand by that it was like that movie?
It was exactly like that. I literally used that movie to show people who are not familiar with these extreme religions, to kind of give them an idea of how I grew up, because it's something that cannot be entirely put in words. And so a lot of people think that Jesus Camp was exaggerated, or they were taking things out of context, and they're not. That movie is spot on. That's really how these camps are. And yes, there are kids just like almost like chanting in a way. I think it does something to us, like in our brain chemistry, our neurochemistry, that kind of puts you in this for people that were not raised Pentecostal, it's hard to explain this. Like, you really do feel things in those services that are very powerful. And when people are children or young teens, for me, I was 12 years old when I first went to a camp like that. And remember, this was following 3 years of being bullied by children and rejected, and was feeling very poorly about myself. And then I show up to this camp that summer that my church was going to, and just experiencing these very, very powerful emotions, and being told that was God. That's God with you. What you feel there, like if you watch Jesus Camp and you see these kids and they're crying and they're like moving back and forth and whatever, they're really having a very, very significant emotional experience there, just created by that environment. And it really is that way. And I really did go to a camp every single summer throughout the time I was 12 until I finished high school. Actually, I really liked going there. I used to go, and even on the weeks that were not for me as a camper, and I would do dishes there for like to work on the dish crew so I could be there more. So that camp was pretty much like through high school. I would go for about 6 weeks and wash dishes at the camps and be at the services at night and things like that. It was a really big part of my life. I can definitely say authoritatively that's really what those camps are like.
Yeah, that and matter of fact, the camps or the youth group that you were in somehow got you to thinking that maybe you should do this for a living and you should become a minister, right?
Right. So, I don't know that this is the way it is in all youth groups in the faith I was raised, but in my particular church, I can say there was really a lot of pressure to feel called in the ministry. And I don't think the youth leaders really understood that that's what they were doing. But it was just, I had a friend that, decided he was going to be a teacher, and everybody was like, okay, like no one really cared. But then if someone stood up and said, I've been called to be in the ministry, everybody would just clap and cheer and applaud. And it was almost like this level you were supposed to reach. And so, yeah, I think that just sort of, I didn't decide I was called to the ministry because I wanted all the applause or anything. I just think that the environment that created, that's a big goal. That's something that's really, really good. It just kind of made me come to believe. And I will say also, we're talking about these camps. I mean, our youth services in general on Wednesday nights were not, I wouldn't say as extreme as the camps, but they were definitely on par with them. And so you're having these weekly experiences, and you're constantly hearing, a very large percentage of the youth group that I went into the ministry. And I don't think that's a coincidence. It's because we were all pretty much told that that's really the ultimate way of giving your life to God, is when, he calls you to be a minister. And so, I would say close to half the people that and we were in a pretty large church, a large youth group, ended up in Bible college. And many are still in the ministry today. I mean, most that did that are still pursuing that. But yeah, I just, through, I guess, just all these ideas and the environment and everything, I really came to believe that I was called into the ministry, and I took that very seriously. I really never actually did announce it to the youth group, so it definitely wasn't something just to try to get hey, look, I'm called now too. I genuinely believe that in my heart. So I will say the one good thing that came out of that was I had one more year left of high school, and I was barely passing my classes. And I thought, if I need to go to Bible college and learn just, to be a minister or whatever, I need to learn how to study. I need to know how to write papers and prepare for exams. So I really, buckled down and actually tried in school, made good grades. My last year there, took my education a lot more serious. But even then, it wasn't really for the sake of the education. It was just a means to an end to prepare myself, to do well in Bible college. And then, the fall after that, I enrolled in Bible college in Missouri. The college actually is not open anymore. But I went to Central Bible College in Springfield, Missouri.
Oh, Springfield, Missouri. I've been there many times.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a nice place.
I was in an Assemblies of God church. We used to joke that was like our Mecca, basically.
It is. I'm aware of that. For many years, I participated in a conference called Skepticon that took place. 1,000 plus atheists gathered in Springfield, Missouri, for that very purpose.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's moved to St. Louis now. I think I haven't kept up with it, but yeah, it's good fun. Now, I think if I recall correctly, while you were at that college, and I've got my air quotes up, college, you had some science classes or science-like classes, or at least explanations about why the earth is young and how creationism is true. Tell us a little bit about creationism and your understanding of it at that time.
I guess calling them science classes now is definitely using the term science loosely, but we did have 2 semesters of biology was one and physical science was the other. And I don't know where in the world they got these textbooks from, but yeah, it was definitely a very, very biased view. I know one particular thing I remember being taught in physical science about like why evolution could not be true was it was saying some weird thing about that the sun is shrinking at a specific rate, and so if we look back to 5 million years ago or whatever the time period they were using, basically they're trying to say that there's no way the Earth could have been more than 10,000 years old, which is now I know it's ridiculous, but what they were saying is if you went back these X millions of years or a billion years or whatever, the sun would have been so big. The sun was where the Earth currently is, so it's impossible the solar system could have been that. Well, I just kind of accepted that as true.
Yeah.
Because
why not?
Why the people that I'd always looked to for truth. I mean, not necessarily particular professors, but the people in the faith. And these, my professor had a PhD in the sciences. I'm not sure exactly where he got that PhD from. It's actually very disturbing that somebody with that advanced education would be teaching these things. But, it was all just kind of like stuff like that on like how you could show that, evolution and these old Earth ideas just could not possibly be true. And, of course, were never presented with anything that would support evolutionary theory in the age of the Earth.
Right, and you've talked about it here, but in the book you talk about how, I'm sure you guys would have said evolutionists, they lie, they make up stuff, they have, sin in their hearts, they're trying to get you over to the devil, and evolution is debated and no one really believes it, and all of those things. Does that sound like the stuff you might have heard?
Yes, exactly. And it was kind of like, why present the data of the evolution as if it's all made up?
Yeah.
Because they're just trying to be deceitful anyway. And so it's...
Yep.
They definitely take it to the step further of not just, scientists are deceived or whatever,
right,
but that they are intentionally trying to deceive people.
So you eventually finished your degree, I think it's called, right? Is it a seminary, college degree? Is it...
Yeah, it was a college degree. I got a Bachelor's of Arts, and
went to work for pennies, right?
I'm sorry, what?
You went to work for pennies and dollars.
So what they didn't tell me in Bible college is that at least in this particular denomination, if you're female or if you're single, getting a job in ministry is very, very difficult, and pretty much the only churches that will even be, they always want the married males. And so if a church is hiring someone who is unmarried, I would say actually unmarried men have it even worse. They start thinking about, we get some guy in here who's not married and he's a youth pastor. He might start sleeping with the teenagers. These are things that are actually talked about.
Yeah, because he's just looking for some girls. That's why he's doing this.
Yeah.
But you gave the impression that...
it could have been worse.
Yeah. You were getting like $800 a month?
At the first church I worked at, I was actually making a reasonable salary, not a good one, but I would say for a starting position, it was actually not that bad. But that position ended up not lasting very long. The senior pastor resigned. A whole bunch of really horrible things happened in the church that aren't really worth getting into, but just people not getting along, basically taking sides, turning against the senior pastor, and so he left.
Well, unbeknownst...
in this denomination, if your senior pastor leaves, pretty much all the associates leave too, because the next guy that comes along wants to bring in
his own crew,
whoever he wants. So then it became, looking for another position, and I found another position at a church that was not a poor church at all. It was just a pastor that really hoarded and had a lot of greed and a lot of problems. But anyway, he just paid his associates very, very little. But at the time, that's really, when you're a young single girl who's a minister, and I was a licensed minister, I was ordained and everything, but that's just really the best you can get unless you're just very lucky.
Right.
And so, in fact, I knew many that graduated with me that they never even got a position at all. and they just had to go do something else. So anyway, yeah, I was working for well under $1,000 a month. I ended up getting a lot of debt and a lot of financial problems that happened from that. And just overall, there were some things with the ministry I really loved. I loved connecting with the people and the families and things like that. But I would say just in general, I wasn't happy doing that. I didn't really understand why I wasn't happy, because I didn't know at the time that I was not living my authentic self, because what I'd been taught was your authentic self was, laying yourself on the altar of God and letting him control your life. And so I thought I was being who I was, really,
Right.
supposed to be and following my heart, but I wasn't, and everything always just fell out of place. And
well, one of the things I really liked about the stories, and you don't know this, but for a couple of years, I pretended as an adult to be a Missouri Synod Lutheran. And if you are religious, or even if you're religious and wavering, one of the things that can cure you of religion very quickly is getting involved with the politics of a church.
Yes.
And the lies and the cheating and the infighting and name calling and wow. And I don't know if you had this feeling, but I had this feeling, and I was an atheist at the time pretending to be religious, but you want to think that, well, these are the highest ranking people in this church. They surely have to be better than even the average Christian, which is way better than the average non-Christian. But when you see their behavior and what they do, it's just awful.
Yeah. It's, I don't want to turn this into a bashing thing or whatever, but I just, at times that I've reconnected briefly with some old acquaintances or friends, I guess they were friends, not now or whatever, they usually never last, because they just do things that are really horrible, and they don't see that. It's like, I don't know. They're just kind of in this bubble, I guess, where they're just not really thinking through their behaviors or whatever. I really think part of it is, at least I was in a Pentecostal church, and I mean, let's say you or let's say I met you in public and I treated you like shit. And then I went home that night, I'd be like, man, I really treated that guy like shit. I feel bad, and then you have to deal with that. But when you're a Pentecostal, you go to church on Sunday morning, you get this really nice, good feeling when the music is playing and everything. And so it's very easy to kind of be like, well, everything I've done must be okay, because I feel really good right now while I'm in the presence of God. And if I wasn't okay, then I wouldn't feel so good. That's kind of what I think is happening there. And so they just sort of descend into these, first it's a little lie and then bigger lies and treating people horrible. But because they always kind of feel good during these services, it's kind of all settled as, I must not have done anything wrong. Where the rest of the world, we have to actually deal with our, the social consequences and just emotional consequences of, errors that we've made.
Right.
Or whatever. And that's just my opinion, what I think is going on there.
And then
the further someone gets into that, the longer they've experienced that, then they end up in leadership, and they end up just doing really, really terrible things that are shocking.
And all of that, and the lack of money and lack of fulfillment. At some point, you started looking at the idea of going to college, and then found out that your school was not accredited, and so nothing counted. Nothing went forward. Boy, that's a slap in the face. You're like, wow, great, that was worthless. Now, you can feel kind of stuck, but you went to school and you took a class on the brain, and then you took a class on evolution. And what did you learn?
Well, when I took the class on the biology of the brain and how it connects to our behavior, I was actually still in ministry. I was taking classes part-time, but there was hints about evolution in there, and it made a lot of sense to me. So I didn't really decide, I believe evolution is true. It just sort of put this doubt in my mind of well, wait a minute, what if there was more to this than I'd been told, and then that was a very scary proposition for me. But yeah, I ended up leaving the ministry entirely to go to school full time. I intended at the time to become a Christian counselor or something like that. I just wanted to do something different. But by then, I'd been exposed to enough about evolutionary theory that I couldn't get out of my mind. I was constantly wondering. I was constantly having these doubts. And so I took a class called Genetics and Evolution. It was just a very basic course that was not even designed for like the biology majors or whatever. This was just like someone who could be studying art history, and this would be one of their science courses that they took to count towards their science credits. So it was very basic. And I actually did not need that course to graduate, but I just needed to know. Like I couldn't stand the questions and doubts anymore. And at the time, I really thought what I'll learn in this. I mean, I wouldn't say I thought this for sure, but I was leaning towards, I'll learn about this, see it's completely ridiculous, and then I can, kind of put this to bed and move on with my life. I knew there was the possibility that I might learn that actually I've been taught things that were very wrong, and I just hadn't really thought through how that would affect me. But regardless, I just needed to know. And so it was just a very foundational understanding of, it started off just about what we can figure out about natural, kind of what Darwin did. You just kind of study nature in the world, and it just becomes kind of obvious that, animals adapt to their environments, and then you just kind of two and two together. Well, if this has been happening for millions upon millions of years, how much have they changed? And that made sense. And then he kind of went in more into the nitty gritty about like what's happening with evolution, like down on a very basic level. What is DNA? When a genetic mutation happens, what does that mean? And, it really put it like, now these were very hard facts that were just undeniable. So we were learning about like the nucleotides in DNA and how sometimes when DNA is copying itself, it makes an error and puts the wrong, nucleotide in there. And, everything just sort of fell together. And I didn't leave the faith immediately at that point, but I would say that was really the point at which it was over and there's just no coming back. Because I tried to make my faith work. I reached out to people, and it's funny because they'll tell you growing up in church, if you ever have questions, it's okay to ask. And, we don't have a check your brain at the door policy, is what you always say. You can always come and ask questions until you actually start doing that.
Yeah.
And that's. I did have one couple that really stood by me and did their best to help me, but pretty much everybody else was extremely intolerant of these questions, and friendships were starting to fall apart, relationships were not going well, and some people, by then, online interactions were becoming more common, and people would just stop talking to me. I would ask them questions because they would say, well, if you have questions, I'm happy to help. And if I don't know the answers, I'll find someone who does. And so I ask them questions. The next thing you know, I never hear from them again. It's like,
yeah,
that was it.
It's something clicked in their brain.
You have enough experiences like that, you start to realize these people don't have the answers that they told me they did.
Yeah, that's what I found out when I left. And now for me, it was when I was 13, but I asked what I thought would be genuine, pretty easy questions for a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old to answer to me because I was a 13-year-old, and they couldn't. And I was like, why is this so hard? If this is true, this should be easy. Just give me the answers to my questions. And, of course, what I'm going to do is kind of wrap things up because I don't want to ruin the entire book because I want some people to buy it. But you talk about all these information about evolution. You talk about losing friends and loneliness, but it gets better, right? And you even found some people in your history that you were able to reconcile with, which is just so heartwarming. So if anyone else is having any kind of experience, even just mild doubts, if I probably don't have a ton of religious listeners, but if you have questions, check out this book. Again, it's called Black Sheep, My Journey from Evangelical Christianity to Atheism. Absolutely delightful. There's also talk not only about evolution, but the Bible and the crazy, wacky stuff in there, because at some point you went to go seek answers from the original source itself, the text, and that didn't go well. Can you give us any kind of wrap-up thing? And, of course, if you're available for people to talk to you or email you or ask you questions, how can they do that?
I do have an email. It's just CassieFox@gmail.com. I have a website, Cassie Fox, or author CassieFox.com. is that terrible? I actually write other books. This is just one of my pen names, and this is not what I primarily do. So off the top of my head, I might even be giving you my wrong web address, but I'll definitely send it to you. I'm also on Facebook. Just look up Cassie Fox. It's kind of obvious who I am. I don't have the most active Facebook page. Occasionally post some atheist things or, just relevant things like that. But anyway, yeah, there's different ways you can reach out to me. And definitely, if any, like you said, I doubt you have that many listeners that are religious or trying to come out of religion, but you never know who could come across this later when they're starting to question things. And I definitely, in my book, like when you were saying, like, what did I learn in that genetics and evolution class? I actually went on to study biology and it just completely threw away my prior plans. And I do kind of give a basis of, like, here's the science I hope anyway that I've done a good job making it so a lay person who doesn't know anything about this
it was very well done.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like, I've read a lot of books by amazing scientists who are trying to make this understandable to people, and I'm not saying that they haven't done a good job, but sometimes I read them and think, these people grew up knowing about science and everything, so I don't think that they are able to really understand someone like me, who was well into my 20s, and I knew nothing about evolution.
It was very interesting because as I was reading through the segments, I guess I'll call them, not even necessarily chapters, but where you were explaining the joy and the happiness and the delight of learning this new thing, that part of my brain is going, duh, but it's a fascinating thing to think about how bizarrely sheltered and possibly damaged your development was as an educated person because of the culture / religion that you were in, that things that, just were common sense, that's how the world works, were these amazing, fantastical revelations to you. And so I was able to enjoy that.
Through the book, when I'm reaching out to people who are questioning their faith, I guess that those were my true feelings. The reason I wanted that so much a part of the book is to help people see that if you walk away from this faith, you're not going to find this hopeless, joyless way of existence, that the world is actually really exciting, that this is like, you're moving from one thing to something even better. I'm so much happier discovering just new truths about the world than I ever was at these camps or anything like that. That, this stuff is really fascinating. It's really amazing. It is like very, and of course, I naturally love these things, so I'm sure my joy is even greater, but, just learning where we came from and everything is just, it makes you feel much more connected to the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of being separate from it, and you feel like this is my home, this is where I belong, and this is really awesome how we came to be. It's okay that we are, a product of natural selection and evolution. Actually, it's not just okay; it's wonderful, I guess if there's one thing to say about the book is just, I do discuss the damage that religion did to me. I definitely did experience damage, I'm sure, developmentally and in many ways. But overall, I feel very fortunate that I got out of that. Most people that grew up with me in the church I grew up with are still fully engaged in the faith. They never found their way out, and it's really, I take it as a positive message, and look at all the wonderful things that we can gain and learn about from this world. And anyway.
No, that sounds like the beautiful, optimistic place to leave it for today. And I thank you so much for your time and being on The Phil Ferguson Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great.
I'm not even an atheist. I'm what you might call an anti-theist. I think religion is a bad idea. I think it's a tool used by the powers that be to control the weak-minded in our society. But you can't pour that on a form, so I just write Church of England. I'm actually a lapsed Catholic. Any Catholics in? Oh, quite a few over there, yeah. I'm a lapsed Catholic. I knew my days were over in the Catholic Church when I found myself at communion thinking, I like the wine, I'm loving the wafer. Any chance of a bit of cheese? Don't get me wrong, though, I still respect the Pope. I like to think of the Pope as king of the pedos. He's the best one. He's the ringleader. He's Gary Glitter's boss. Catholics are a weird bunch. Look at the rosary. Basically, anal beads. I saw a documentary recently on Channel 4. It was all about faith. And in it, someone went, well, of course, Scientology is a made-up religion. I thought, as opposed to... It's one of my favourite things is to get Christians talking about Scientology. Because the Christian will go, Scientologists, they're nutters, they believe in aliens. And then you can say to the Christian, what do you believe in again? It's a benevolent zombie that's coming back to save you, isn't it? Good luck with that, that will probably happen.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
It's an amazing time with the stock market and everything, and you would think that probably my biggest problem would be people calling me in a little bit of a panic. Thankfully, that's not the case. I've had a few people who wanted reassurances that everything is going to be okay, and I do my best for that. And I had one husband and wife team that wanted to talk and readjust their portfolio, and we worked on that. But the vast majority of my clients are doing exactly what I would have expected them to do. Exactly what I want them to do. And that is to send in more money. Not to me. I mean, my billing would go up if you add money, because that's how that works. But sending it into TD Ameritrade, where all of my clients' accounts are at, in their own names, by the way, not in my name. It's always in your name. People can send money there and add to their portfolio. Typically, the stock market has 10 to 15% short-term corrections, every year, twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. Sometimes you go a year or two and you don't have one. And they're swift and they're annoying and they go back up. The last one we had was in 2018, and I think 2017 might have had 3 of these. I didn't actually check. And those are just kind of the normal part of the business, and every once in a while, a little scary drop or volatility shakes out some of the novices and the people who just don't have the stomach for stock market investing, and we go back up and we continue on. And from 2008, early 2009 until a couple of weeks ago, the market's been pretty much up. Like I said, we've had these corrections. 2018 in the fall, in the fourth quarter, we had a bigger drop, but I ignore those because you should continually add money. If you're farther from retirement, you have no bonds. You just add money to stocks, because that's how you make money in the long run. If you're getting closer to retirement or in retirement, you want to think about how big the cushion needs to be. And it's all about your cash flow, not a fixed percentage number. If someone forces me to pick a number, I'll say 40% because I know that's a nice, safe, conservative number, 40% of your portfolio in bonds. But for some people, the right number is 32%. And for some people, it's been 10% or less, even in retirement, to have in bonds. And that would usually be someone who has a really big portfolio and they take a very small amount out. Because if the market takes a big drop, you can just live off the dividends for a year or two. Or if you can even skip taking money out because you have Social Security and or some pensions, so you don't need the money. You can always take more risk when you don't need the money at all. When you need every penny, that's when you got to be a little careful. However, we are now at the point where from peak to trough, as they like to say in the biz, the stock market's down about 28% as of this recording, and usually drops bigger than 20%, which we really haven't had for a long time, start to entice me. And it may not do anything for you, but remember that one of the most basic fundamental things about investing is buy low, sell high. And of course, as one would expect, as I expect, and as I've experienced over 20 plus years, when the calendar year 2019 ended with a stock market return of 31%, nobody called me or emailed me and said, Phil, I just made too much goddamn money. I want to become more conservative. Because when you're winning, you don't want to stop. It's when you're losing that you do a little soul searching and you want to reevaluate things, because that's kind of scary. And again, if you're long term, you can't ignore it. You should ignore it. Don't look. Look away. And I say this knowing that in just a few short days, April 1st, March 31st, statements will come out. And a few days after that, people are going to see their portfolio numbers in print. And it becomes real, because it's going to be a lot lower than what it was on 12/31. Although if you go back an entire year, right now anyway, it's about the same as a year ago, give or take. But as humans, and I know I've done this in the past, and I'll probably do it myself, anytime I look at a statement that's lower than the previous quarter, it is disconcerting, to say the least. Just don't panic. Don't do anything stupid. I mean, if you thought of a month or so ago of selling some stuff because you just made too much money for too many years, great. And for some clients, I've done that. Historically, the cushion was 10 to 12 years, and then I went to 11 to 13, and now it's 12 to 14. So I'm going to change that a little bit. I'm going to take one of those years off. You don't need to be 12 to 14 years in your cushion anymore. You can go to 11 to 13. And yes, this is a minor adjustment back towards normal, because we're not trending over the long-term return of 10% over the last 3 to 5 years anymore. Does it mean it's going to go up? No. Does it mean it's going to go down? No, I don't know. Okay, I don't know, but I do know that when the market is down 28, 30%, we're starting to get into unusual territory. And I was looking at this article on CNBC, and I guess the title of it is "Based on History, the Stock Market is Pricing in a Recession and Maybe Something More Onerous." Nice word. And it goes through some of the statistics of how big peak to trough drops have been. And so, like I said, right now for the S&P 500, we're at about 30% down from the peak to where we are today. I don't know that this is the bottom. It might be more, but we're down 30% already. In 08 to into 09, it was down 57% over a period from 07 through 08 and through 09. The 2001 was down 49%. Early 90s was down 20%. Early 80s was down 27%. A couple of years earlier in the 80s, it was down 17%. In the 70s, it was down 48%. Again, 69 and 70s, 36%. 14% in the early 60s. Late 50s, 21%. Early 50s, 15%. So you can see that out of all these recession drops in the stock market, we're now at the point where 30% is kind of in the ballpark. It's not the worst. It still may end up being the worst, but it's a time where I'm a little more interested in adding money. Now, if your job is at risk, if your income is at risk because of the fuckery of the U.S. government, whether you think it's good or bad, or whether Trump screwed the pooch for 6 weeks while this came around us and it's going to get a lot worse. If you think it's going to go a lot lower, then maybe you're not so motivated to put some cash in. But at a 30% discount compared to where it was a month ago, I'm starting to get a little excited. I'm starting to think maybe it's time to throw in some money. So this is not a generic across the board change your portfolio advice, but this is if you happen to be so blessed, and yes, I use that word on purpose. If you happen to be so blessed that you have $50,000 lingering in a checking or savings account and you've been too stupid to put it to work in the stock market, yeah, you won. You just hit the lottery. Now, if there's any concern about your income or cash flow or losing your job or making less because of the economic uncertainty of these times, leave it where it is. But if you feel pretty safe and secure and you can live without it for years to come, it might be a time to add a little extra money to your portfolio. Don't do anything stupid. I'm not talking about remortgaging your house and taking out cash or getting a second loan or borrowing money at 22% off your credit card. But if you had money you kept kind of meaning to get around to putting into the stock market, and you even thought about it in February or January or last year, and you thought maybe the market got a little ahead of itself and now it's 30% off from where it was a month ago, might be a nice time. Now, If you put it in now and the market goes down 20%, let's say you put in 50,000, it goes down 20%, of course you lost $10,000. But of course, eventually it goes back up. That's why this has to be money you don't need. I'm not talking about money that you might want to put on a house in 2 or 3 years. I'm talking about money for retirement. Again, long-term investing. And think of it as a little bit of a sale. Now, if you want to be a little more adventuresome, let me check this here. One of the funds that I use that has just gone down dramatically is, let's see, what is it here? It is the Vanguard Small Cap Value Fund. Now, thankfully, it's generally been a small portion of portfolios, but if you want to take a little bit more of a gamble, this is something you could add money to specifically. So instead of the S&P 500 or the total stock market or a couple of different funds that you have, this segment of investing has done horribly, absolutely terrible. And I think as of the time of this recording, it is down 43% year to date. 43% year to date. It's funny, it's down 42% in 3 months and down 42.5% in 1 month. And yesterday, it was down 11%. I'm much more confident that this is an overreaction and that it being down 40-something% is a good opportunity. But of course, this is a riskier kind of thing. And again, I'm not going to sell everything and put it in this one fund because it's done the worst, but it's now more interesting to me. It's more likely, I think, because of regression to the mean, to do well in the future. So if you have a $100,000 portfolio and you've got an extra $5,000 you can add, this might be a place where you could add it. If you have $1 million portfolio and you have $100,000 in your bank account, yay for you. That's a whole bunch of money. Maybe you could put some of it here or all of it here. It's just something to think about. It's an idea because over the last couple years, as we've made a lot of money, we've gone to slightly more conservative positions. We've beefed up bonds. We've extended the length of the cushion from 10 to 12 all the way out to 12 to 14, which I'm now going to step back by 1 year. So you only need 11 to 13 years of cushion. It's the general guideline. If you're more conservative, it can still be bigger. If you're more aggressive, it can be a little smaller. And it's a possibility where you can add money. You might want to add it, and you might want to add it to somewhere here. Now, the next step, again, this is for someone who is hopefully farther away from retirement, has more money than what's necessary. They're doing well, and they're really secure about their job. And they're really secure about their job over the next couple of years. It is possible that if you have something like 30% of your portfolio in the cushion because you're 3 or 4 years out from retirement, and for whatever reason you've decided, or we've decided together, if you're a client, that that's the right amount, that you could trim that sum and add that to stocks. Again, it's a rebalancing. And in part, the rebalancing could become automatic if you're rebalancing once a year. Maybe you throw in an extra rebalance now. The stocks have fallen, the bonds have stayed the same. Therefore, they become a bigger part of your portfolio than maybe you wanted. It's a nice time to rebalance. But you can overbalance. Again, not right for everybody. If you're doing this on your own, just something to think about. If you've got questions about how that might work, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If I get buried in emails, I might have a hard time getting back to you. If you are already a client of Phil of Polaris Financial Planning and you want to discuss this in detail and contemplate your future, and I haven't called you to talk about it already, give me a call. Send me an email, and we can either talk about it then or have some discussions about it and set up a time. And maybe in the meantime, the stock market jumps 20% and we missed out on the sale. I'm not so sure that's going to happen. I think we're going to be headed for some rough times. I think it's very likely we're going to have a recession, and I don't know which way the market's going to go, but I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to to go down some more for a while. And, like I said, this is a long-term thing. So if that sounds like you and you feel particularly risky or risk tolerant and you want to take some of your portfolio or some of your cash and add it to stocks or particular stock funds that have done the worst, at least as far as index funds. And this doesn't work for just generally managed funds. I mean, if you have 10 managed funds in your portfolio and you look at those 10 funds and you pick the one that's done the shittiest and add money to it, I don't like that idea at all. There's no indication that the shittiest fund is going to become the better fund in the future. But with large market segments that I use from Vanguard with their index funds, large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value, those funds do have regression to the mean historically. Does not necessarily mean it works this time, but something to think about. So if that's something that you like the idea of it, let me know. If you've just had too much volatility and you're done and you want to reduce your stocks, I will recommend against it right now, but you can talk me into it. So just let me know what you want to do if you're a client and you just happen to be a regular listener to their show. If you've been thinking about hiring an advisor and you have over $1 million, because that's my current minimum, you can also contact me again, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and we can see if we can work something out. I'd like to wrap up by telling you I'll see you out there on the road somewhere like I normally do, but I'm not gonna, because I'm not going out. I'm not going out any more than I should or I can, and I don't think you should go out if at all possible. Stay safe, stay well, try to not interact with more people than you have to, and hopefully in a few months we can find some medicines that can help people recover from this virus faster, and we can keep it at a moderate level. I'm not optimistic, by the way, but maybe we can. And 12 to 18 months from now, we end up with a vaccine and we can all go back to normal society. But in the meantime, we're going to have to limit our movements when we can. I don't know how else to do that, but try not to go out and be in big crowds. So conferences and a lot of the fun stuff that we do, we're just going to have to set that aside for a while, I think. I know some people really, really hate this idea. And we'll see, I guess. We'll see how it works. I've looked at the last few days in Italy while the numbers keep going up. They've been going up about 9, 10, 11% per day. And before today, when the new tests started kicking in, because the government finally got its shit together and delivered tests, even with limited number of tests available, the cases in the United States was growing at 25% per day, not 10 or 11 like Italy is. Will Italy make the corner, turn the corner, flatten the curve, whatever they're going to do? I don't know. I really hope so. I just wish it magically all goes away, but I don't know that it is. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. And again, if you want to talk, just let me know. And until we get past the virus and I can see you again, ciao.
Let's kick it. All right, stop. Open your Bible and listen. Pastor Frank is about to start preaching. The Holy Spirit grabs a hold of me tightly, pouring blessings over me daily and nightly. He will never stop. Oh, I know. Seek him always and you'll grow. At the foot of the cross, I take off my sandals, giving him my burdens and the rest he can handle. Pray, crush the enemy, he's doomed. Sending him straight to the emergency room. Godly, crucified so we can be free. He gave us life and we are his prodigy. Love him, believe him, you better pick a way. There's two paths to choose and God don't play. If there was a problem, yo, he'll solve it. Check out the Bible, also watching us closely. We're no Catholics, but grab your rosary, heathens. You gotta listen close, it's a hot problem. You gotta diagnose. The sound crew on standby, ready for an open fight. You gotta look up, cause he's gonna fight. Be ready. He's coming any second. Repent for your sins and you'll go to heaven. We were dead, yo, so we decided on CCV. Coverage Apple Avenue Christians. So read your Bible discreetly. We're rich in Christ, don't need Lamborghinis. Jealous, Satan's almost out of time. Jesus is the branch and we are the vine. Ready for God to take us all. Heathens, listen up, it's almost curtain call. Trumpets will ring out like a bell. Listen, let's go to heaven, not hell. Falling on my knees real fast. Not sure what day will be my last. Bumper to bumper, Calvary's path. I'm trying to get a seat that's not in the back. Our sins have been clean, you know what I mean. He died for us, perfect for the ones that we've seen. If there was a problem, yo, he'll solve it. Now give your life to him and God will revolve it. Jesus Christ, baby. Jesus Christ, baby. Jesus Christ, baby. Jesus Christ, baby. My soul for him. Jesus Christ, baby. My soul is yours. Jesus Christ, baby. Take it all. Jesus Christ, baby. My soul. Drops mic. Walks off stage. Hold on, wake her up.